Welcome to the Digital Forester podcast, where we talk to foresters about how they are using digital technologies in their day-to-day forestry work. All right. Well, welcome, Phil, to the Digital Foresters podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Well, thanks for inviting me, Kevin. I'm doing really well. It's a nice sunny day down here near Lake Ontario. And how's things up in Ottawa?
Yeah, not too bad. This year allergies have been pretty bad, so I'm normally not. I don't have too many problems with them, but this year it just seemed to be giving me grief. Today is one of those days. So if you see me dabbing using a Kleenex, apologies in advance. But yeah, I can't complain. It's a beautiful day going into the weekend. We're opening up in Ontario.
Numbers are going down. COVID numbers are dropping. So
absolutely. So were you at the bar at 12:01 a.m. this morning at the patio?
I'll wait a little bit. But I'm sure. But we're having my son-in-law's birthday was yesterday, so we're having them over, and we're going to actually now allowed to have a dinner on our back deck with them, 2 different tables.
Right.
But it'll be nice to see the grandkids and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking with a lot of people, it's been a hard year with especially grandparents not being able to see. I think with ours, if we don't head out to the prairies until next summer, it'll be like 2.5 years of missed window, for grandma and grandpa there. It's shocking when you run the months together, and but we do what we can do. Yeah, so absolutely. So you're the CEO of First Resource Management Group.
Right.
Kick things off for us. How'd you get into forestry? Tell us that journey for our listeners
well,
around
the world. Tried to avoid forestry when I was a young man. I was in university and I was interested in statistics and zoology, but the statistics got me into management consulting, and that brought me into the forest industry. And so, kicking and screaming, I got into forestry. And I guess I've been in forestry for about 25 years now. And this company we set up because the original group of people were a client of mine, and I drew up I was doing a lot of work in the forest industry right across the country. And we had dinner at a Chinese restaurant with my partner Alan Foley, and I drew up something on the proverbial napkin at a Chinese restaurant and said, if you do this and that, we can grow a company. And we did this and that. And then that was January 1st, 2010, we launched. So that's how I ended up as CEO of a forestry company.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that some of best entrepreneur stories that comes from a napkin in some shape and form. And I've chatted with your partner Alan. They're great. You two are great guys. So for the audience, I think FRMG is a little unique because you're also playing a management component, a steward land management component, but also a technology side. So maybe for our listeners, tell us what's at play, because I think it's unique. Like you're living, breathing forestry on the ground. So maybe.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I mean, that's an interesting question. And so we actually have 3 divisions. We have forest management with forest carbon, and we have the SkyForest division. And so when we started the company, one of the ideas we had is let's get into forest management, which is how we started. And so we currently manage in varying degrees, but quite high degrees, about 8 million hectares of crown forest across Ontario.
8 million. Wow.
Yeah. So that's about a fifth of the industrial, what's industrially used forest in Ontario. Currently, we're playing a significant role in the forest management and the sustainability of those forests. But the idea of getting in there is let's get good at that, and while we're there, we'll see opportunities for other things that need to happen. And the first one we started actually was our forest carbon business. We've done the largest afforestation project in Ontario, sequestering 77,000 tons of carbon offsets.
Wow.
And that's picking up, and that's something we continue to do because we're using our forest management experience on private land. So we replant trees on fallow farmland and get agreements with landowners to generate the carbon offsets, which we sell in the voluntary market. Then the SkyForest came about because I noticed our foresters were always complaining about the quality of the forest resource inventory. We were writing the Temiskaming Forest Management Plan. It was 30 years old, and when the guys are out logging, they're saying, "You told me there was going to be hardwood here, and there isn't any. You told me there was going to be softwood, and there isn't any." So, at the same time, the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources had flown, the new stereo imagery just a few years before, but it was because of the format of the files. It wasn't something people could easily look at.
Right.
It wasn't a JPEG, right? And so they were saying, we need you guys to compress these images so we can look at them easily. And I thought, my background in statistics kicked in. You don't have enough information and you want me to compress really high resolution imagery, something doesn't compute. There's got to be information in that imagery that we can use to give you the information you need, right?
Right.
So,
right.
So that set us out on a quest to try.
So I guess thinking for some of our audiences that may not be familiar, Ontario, the innovation side was digital imagery, correct? They're flying stuff. So it was kind of going from traditional photogrammetry into stereo digital photogrammetry. And that's what you're talking about as you're saying, Ontario is doing this and you're identifying challenges, I guess, opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the late 2000s, they flew digital stereo photography with the purpose of just doing more photo interpretation. And, that took a long time to do. And when we finally got it, there was a lot of issues. You just can't get consistency with photo interpretation. It depends on who it is that did it and which company did it. And you actually see on the map sheets, you can go from one map sheet to the next and the polygons are all different. The forest things are mapped differently, right? So how does that help, right? So I was hearing all these problems and said, there's got to be a better solution. We couldn't actually extract that much from the digital aerial photography that the government had collected. There was a number of issues with it, quality control issues. So we said, well, let's try satellite imagery. And then we connected with some very bright academics, and we developed SkyForest. We've got 2 patents on it, and we're now literally doing it from BC to Newfoundland.
Yeah, so maybe walk me through. So I've been looking forward to this conversation with you. So we kind of joked on some earlier calls. It's like, even though we're what, a 5-hour drive from each other, it's we only see each other whether on Vancouver or Helsinki or something. I think the last time I saw you, we were in Helsinki in Finland, and I had a hotel room with air conditioning. And you did not, and it was not that pleasant for you there. But that's a whole other
well,
story.
it was not only that, but it's we couldn't find a hotel room. So Yves Vivier, who's our vice president of forestry, was in the same hotel room as me.
Yeah.
And it's 24-hour daylight. So I ended that week with maybe 2 hours sleep a day.
Yeah.
It was pretty rough.
Yeah, certainly in our younger days, maybe bunking with someone works, but I don't know about you, but I'm kind of past that stage. It's like I need
way past it, way past it.
Absolutely. So that's a running joke for our listeners that Phil and I chat more abroad than in our own home province, just a few hours drive away. Yeah. So maybe walk us through, because it's unique for a company to hold patents. This is pretty advanced technology, spaceborne remote sensing, applying different types of geospatial techniques. So maybe walk us through that process of, I know you mentioned you partner with some academics and stuff, you have patents, but maybe share with the listeners, was that easy peasy, walk to the park, everything went hunky-dory?
There was a lot of failures, like a lot of attempts that didn't work, and everyone was a learning experience. And I remember the first time when I got the first results, it was the first 6 or 7 months of R&D. We had people out in the field all summer. We hired forest techs, or I guess forestry students. Probably we had them out all summer collecting field data. We wrote a whole lot of code. We did everything, and then we said, okay, churn it out. We looked at it, and it didn't work. And I remember that night, I just was like, oh my God, totally depressing. We've spent all this time, but then we fixed it, and it's been like that all along. And we just keep coming up with new ideas, and we've had some really demanding clients. Like, we've done a good part of the forest resource inventory for the government of Saskatchewan now using SkyForest, and they're a great client to work with because they're very demanding. They really put our data through the ringer in the sense that they collect hundreds of validation plots and check it, and they give us the feedback on it.
Right.
And they say, it'd be really helpful if you could do this. And we go, oh, I think we can do that. And we've had really good clients that way too. We've said, here's a problem we're trying to solve, and then we solve it for them, and there's a new product. So now we have like a whole suite of things we're doing, and that's because of the great clients we've had who keep pushing us to push the information we can extract out of forests. Like, for example, Kevin, now with satellites alone, I can tell you how many steps it takes for a man to walk 15 meters in the forest to within plus or minus 2 steps.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And
So
so,
whole set of new questions that are being raised
absolutely.
by foresters. Yeah. So maybe for our listeners, SkyForce is a patented technology. Maybe to the extent that you can share, of course. Maybe can you describe, what's going in? You've got the secret sauce, and then what's coming out, so our foresters can
Yeah.
relate and go, okay, what's Phil giving me, like BA, height, species, etc.
Yeah, all of those things. So what we do is we it's really, you need to think of it, Kevin, like processing technology. So it's a suite of algorithms that can, automatically grab satellite data, whether commercial satellite data or open source satellite data, like from the national space agencies. Like we've done projects where we've grabbed data from 13 different satellites, both optical and synthetic aperture radar,
Okay.
and then it goes into this big blender. And I guess you could kind of look at it, and we mentioned this, I think you and I have talked about this in the past. We try to look at information on forest the way, not the traditional way the forest industry looks at forest resource inventory, but the way miners think of mineral resources. Because they start off with an inferred resource, which is a very low level of confidence, an indicated resource, which is a little more, and a measured resource, which is a little more.
Right.
And then they go to reserves, and they have probable reserves, which is confident enough to decide to sink a mine shaft, and then proven reserves. And I think we've had a habit in the forest industry and governments that manage forest to go right for the most highly confident one, the proven reserve. But there's a huge need for, a lot of our clients have needs for just, where's the forest? Is it big trees or small trees? Is it hardwood or softwood, right? So then we can grab those satellites, and we can throw that information together for them very quickly over huge areas very cheaply. And then we have other clients, like our government clients, that want the highest degree of confidence. They want quadratic mean diameters, tree heights, stem counts, species, hardwood, softwood, the terrain. We can give them, we have an alternative terrain model to LiDAR. So that's, we can give them a quite accurate digital terrain model. So it's great. It's not as accurate or precise as LiDAR, but it's a fraction of the cost.
Yep.
And so that's also something we give them, and that is forming part of the Saskatchewan provincial terrain, base.
Yep.
So we can give them all that depending on what they're asking for, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
And we've had clients that have us go back and redo stuff every year because there's satellites are taking a picture of every tree on the planet every day.
Yeah.
Either with radar or with optical. And, so why wait 10 years or 15 years till the next, or 20 years in some cases? I mean, there's parts of Canada where governments haven't inventoried since the 60s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Crazy.
Yeah,
When,
it is crazy.
We can give kind of the inferred resource there really quickly. Okay.
Yeah.
As opposed to the proven, you don't need to do the proven reserve if there's no industry, there's no logging, there's no need for the timber. But you still want to know kind of what's there. So that's why I'm saying you've got all these different approaches you can use.
Yeah, well, you make a great point, because I think back to some people I've talked to, and when you look at forestry in Canada and how much it contributes to GDP, and you really then ask the question how much money is invested into, to your point, understanding the inventory, and as you just mentioned, some things are back in the 60s. It really is staggering in terms of it's a major piece of the Canadian economy, and yet in certain aspects the investments, if you will, just aren't being made there. And on your point on the satellite side, the whole EO space has kind of exploded. Even when you look at the landscape, there's whole communities that are venture backed now, companies going public through SPACs, special purpose acquisition vehicles, and so in the geo world, like, those are things that are just fascinating to me, because it's not things we thought about before, but there's definitely a lot of momentum there. So thinking of SkyForce, it's great to hear you doing the Saskatchewan thing. I've watched them, they've been kind of grilling all the different technology, so I think that's a testament that they've chosen FRMG and SkyForce to deliver that inventory. That's got to mean something, right? Are you seeing that those successes kind of flow into other provincial jurisdictions or other countries, for that matter?
Yeah, we are seeing it a little bit, but I will say that the general, I mean, this is a challenge that you and I have spoken about, and I think it became very clear to me when we were in Helsinki together, is the attitude towards forest technology in Canadian governments versus other jurisdictions. And to give you an example, I got some statistics here for your listeners, Kevin. Finland has a population of 5.5 million. And has an $11.5 billion forest sector. Okay, so just to compare to Ontario, Ontario has 14 million people. Now, the forest technology component of the Finnish forest sector, 20 million euros in software and data, 50 million euros in web services for forest managers and owners, and 1 billion euros in intelligent machinery. So you've got a total of over €1 billion, or maybe pushing 2 billion Canadian dollars,
right,
in forest technology in a country with a population of 5.5 million.
Yeah. What are we spending?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So like, how many guys like you and me are there in the forest technology sector in Canada? Like, we're nowhere near €1 billion. We're nowhere near 50 million. Well, we might, across the country, we might hit $50 million. And I think the reason, Kevin, is that the provinces, not all of them, fortunately, but they generally have a sense that they are the guys that have to develop the technology and deploy it.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the Ontario government. They've just committed to $100 million single photon LiDAR acquisition over a 10-year period. Now, let me ask you, Kevin, how many people do you know that have a 10-year cell phone contract?
Yeah, a fair point. A fair point.
Like, why would you commit to a technology for 10 years?
Well, like, yet alone 2 years, right? Like 2 years on a technology front. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's insanity, and they're determined. That's how they're going to do it. Slam the door. And so.
But what do you think? Where do you think that came from? Is that just the big government engine that people listening across the world would say, yeah, it's still, that's the same as us here and there? Certainly, there's pockets. Scandinavia, obviously, they've been a force with their investments in forest technology.
I think Kevin, it's a cultural thing that we spend a lot on government science, and we actually had. One government scientist works in the space you and I are in, come to us and say, look, I don't want you to use my name. I'm doing you a favor here, but you got to know that you're seen as competition to us as government. Right. So I think what you've got is some empire building going in the governments, and they want to own these technologies, and they want to grow them, and they're completely missing the point, which has become very clear with the pandemic, with our inability in Canada to manufacture vaccines.
Right.
That if you haven't got a vibrant, high-tech private sector, you're not there to solve problems. And you look what's going on in the world, Kevin, the massive mega trends going on in forestry, right? You've got people are moving away from plastics. Like, how many times now when you get order a package, does it come with crumpled craft paper rather than styrofoam?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Flipping to plastics. More emphasis on endangered species, on deforestation, more global competition, new building standards. You're getting the taller buildings made out of wood. More public concern over the state of the forests, climate change, and the forest's role in getting billions of trees planted and reforestation. You got a lot happening. Does the government really think that a few government labs can solve all those problems? Like, they need guys like you and me to develop these technologies, and they should be, instead of using their funds to just pick their own, they should be making sure that the technology sector is able to solve those problems, right? And it pays off. Finland has 2% of the world's forests. The market capitalization of the forest industry from Finland is 20% of the global total. Canada has 20% of the world's forests and 2% of the market capitalization. So what are we doing wrong?
Yeah. Some good questions there, and needs to have a look there. So lots there. Definitely, I got a theme there that I want to poke you a little bit. I often joke, you know me well enough. Others like to kind of poke the bear, and vice versa. Expect the same.
Right, Kevin, you usually poke the bear when we're having a beer. So.
Absolutely, for sure. In some foreign country in the middle, sometimes nowhere, but that's cool. So thinking that SkyForce, like I find it fascinating. Like as we kind of said at the start there, you and I were on a Canadian trade mission. forestry technology. We were in Helsinki, Finland. Super cool. It was part of NRC, National Research Council. IRAP was organizing it with the Global Affairs and Canadian Trade Commissioner Service, and a bunch of us. I think there's about 12 of us. Anything from technology to new materials and products. We ended up in Helsinki there, but something came from that, right? Like on our side, we tried to build partnerships. Maybe we're not as smooth at figuring out how to do it, but something came out of that trade mission. Wondering, tell me about it, because I'm equally fascinated to learn about it. I think it's called FireFringe. And
yeah. So we started a collaboration with two Finnish companies, Arvin and Terramonder. So we created a company, a joint venture company called FireFringe. So we're continuing to work on that. And you can download the app on iOS or Android or even Huawei. We're about to release a new version. So wait a couple of days, you'll get the latest and best. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to use our skills with satellites to help people get really up-to-date information on forest fires.
Okay.
And so what we're using is we're showing detections of forest fires around the world, and then in Canada, where we have more information, we're providing a bunch of other data, the fire perimeters, which is what we call it, FireFringe.
Yeah.
We do have a across Canada. We've inventoried all of Canada just in terms of hardwood, softwood, and so that hasn't been released on the app yet, but that's coming. So because that's a huge influence on your how fires spread.
Right.
Okay. So we have that kind of information on there. We developed a platform last year, Kevin, and it had a lot more information. We were showing the burn intensity after the burn and during the burn, so you could see how hot it was burning in places, and you could see. But we ran into some issues with the actual web platform, and so we've put that one on hold for the time being until we try and resolve those issues. I mean, like I say, you're always taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back when it comes to technology, and so we're taking a little rethink on that, but we've kept the app going, and the app is giving us great feedback for what kind of things people are looking for, and stay in that space. So I would say, that's still a bit of an R&D project. The real outcome of it is the app, but where we really hope to play a space, like the basic information, it boils down, Kevin, to inventory again. A lot of the times when people, when there's it's funny talking to our Finnish partners, they say, well, we have a 3-hectare fire, and I say, in Canada, that's a campfire.
Yeah, that's right.
We have 500,000 hectare fires, and their eyes pop out of their heads, right?
Yeah.
But to manage those fires, you need to know what's on the ground, right? And,
yeah, absolutely. And you said, Phil, that app's free for anyone to download,
free for anybody
to access. Very, very cool. Absolutely. And you mentioned Argonaut. They have a long history in Finland in terms of innovation. I'll probably speak with their CEO at some point, type of thing. But one of the key things I like about that story is the partnerships at play. So thinking of our listeners, foresters, listening to this podcast, this series, hearing about different technologies. Some of them they're interested in, some maybe not so, and that's cool. But getting people together and working in that right way, you mentioned getting good feedback from customers, end users, stakeholders. So working with a Finnish partner, how was there a secret sauce there to make sure the partnership was kind of firing on cylinders? You could share with someone saying, hey, I want to reach out to Phil and FRMG, but they're in Canada and I'm in somewhere else. I'm worried about how we could operate. Any pro tips on that?
I mean, I gotta say, I gotta give I've said some slightly derogatory things about some of our governments, but on the federal government's global affairs and international trade, and the National Research Council did a phenomenal job connecting us with Finnish forest technology entrepreneurs, and I was impressed how many there were. As I think you were. I mean, I remember the first day we landed, we're at a reception in the Canadian ambassador's
that was cool,
condo, and I was trying to stay awake, after a transatlantic flight and then a flight from, I think it was from Munich, to
I think you were on the 3-hopper, weren't you? I might have been on the 4-hopper. Yeah.
So I was just probably with eyes open with toothpicks. But they had us mingling with forest technology entrepreneurs right from the Sunday evening to the Friday afternoon of that week, and so we had a lot of opportunities. And I'd said to the Canadian Trade Commissioner there what we were kind of interested in. He said, "I'm going to make some introductions for you." So we had the introductions before we got there, and we just started chatting about some of the things we could do. I mean, they're very active in the LiDAR space, and have been all around the world. And I should say, for your listeners, that SkyForest is not necessarily an alternative to LiDAR, but complementary to LiDAR. And you know that because some of our SkyForest data, our clients that have LiDAR are using our SkyForest with your platform, and they've got some great results by combining the two. And I think that's something you and I need to explore. Preferably over another beer somewhere between Ottawa and Toronto.
Absolutely.
But so we just got talking about some of the things we could do, and we had a pretty good idea. It initially wasn't focusing on forest fires, but by the time we got all the funding arrangements in place, we decided to meet in Reykjavik, as I could get there with one, without having to
Very
jump.
cool.
And he got to Reykjavik the same way. So we met in the Canadian Embassy in Reykjavik. And we sort of brainstormed a list of things where we thought we'd be most able to collaborate, and fires came up very high. That's sort of how that got started.
So I guess the burning question I have right now, no pun intended, there, like, we have an embassy in Reykjavik.
We do, yeah.
Okay, I learned something
pretty
new.
Small, like it's basically the size of a 2-bedroom apartment, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird because you go there and there's these massive, heavy, 2-inch thick glass doors, and you've got to go into an airlock between the two doors.
Yeah.
As soon as you get through that airlock, you're in Canada.
Yeah. It's totally weird there. So So I think you hit on a point that's great that I'd like to explore a little bit, since folks may be thinking about it. You made the comment, LiDAR, single photon LiDAR, obviously, again, you and I being around the block long enough, there's area-based approaches, there's individual trees. I think you're positioning well SkyForce as, look, if you're trying to get down to like really in the weeds, maybe SkyForce isn't great, but I can answer a lot of other great questions that I agree are very important to inventory. So maybe thinking about that, listeners that go and think, I'm on the LiDAR bandwagon now, I don't need this. Maybe share some of your experiences in terms of your views on ABA and ITC, and maybe in some cases where those may not be answering some of the questions foresters and specific in the context of inventory.
The area-based approach, SkyForce compared to that is quite comparable. I mean, our mean squared errors are a little higher. They are definitely a little higher, but I mean a little higher. And so if you look at the price accuracy equation, we're sort of on the way lower price and a little less accuracy, but not a lot. So if the type of inventory you need is area-based, SkyForest is a really good alternative. And that's,
so let me jump in quickly. When you say like way less, and like we talking half, quarter?
Yeah, probably closer to a quarter.
Okay, so big, like not even big. Like that's a huge difference.
So like so where we're positioning ourselves, if you've got millions of hectares to do, and you want you might still want to fly LiDAR every 10 years,
right?
But there's a lot happens in 10 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a lot happens in 1 year for that.
A lot happens in 1 year, right? And like I say, we've got clients where we're doing annual updates over millions of hectares now, right? And sometimes because I call them up, and says, hey, we're tapping into a new satellite, and I can do this now. And says, okay, do it again,
right?
Because they just want that. They just want to know what's there, and we're getting down to like 5 meter resolution on some of the products. So.
Yeah. But Phil, I need individual trees. It's like, I need that. Like, so I can't work with you. I need individual trees. What?
Well, there's cases where you do. Like if you're in southern BC and each stem is worth $15,000, I'm going to tell you, you need some good land. Right. Because then you've got really high value timber. If you're in the boreal and you've got everlasting hectares of black spruce, white spruce, and jack pine, maybe a bit of red pine, and some poplar birch, then do you really need that, right? You need to know, are these 17 meter trees or 25 meter trees, and you know, and what's the volume per hectare? You know, you're getting 100 cubic meters per hectare, 150. You know, that's kind of what you want to know, right? Because when you get in there and log, you're logging stands, you're logging, you know, and fairly small stands. And we automate the stands. So we had algorithms, Sky stands, to do the automatic stand delineation, and they love that, you know, industry and government, because it tells them, you know, here's a patch of trees that are this size and this species and this density, and that's as good as most of them want to know. But clearly there's cases where you want individual tree crowns. And, you know, we have a shared client, and you know, this is they put some of our data on top of the LiDAR data, and I'm not quite sure what they did inside your software, but they love the result. They get phenomenal accuracy out of that. So so, you know, it depends exactly what you're trying to achieve. And that's why I say they're not necessarily alternatives. I think that what will happen with single photon LiDAR, Kevin, is there's going to be tremendous opportunity for SkyForest, because that's going to be static for a long time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's definitely, you know, marrying different data sets together. I don't want to go so far as say like data fusion. There's all the buzzwords that have come and gone, but the complementary nature of different techniques and methods and data, definitely, I think there's digital foresters out there realizing that there's value there. And one of the things I always when I talk with people is it's not a do it once and then forget about it. It's a journey. And so often people I talk to is just take one step forward, pick something, start it, recognizing that there's going to be a phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, just as technology changes, knowledge changes, and instead of just waiting for that perfect thing, it's like do something and learn from it, and versus waiting and letting the world go by. So yeah, so thinking of SkyForce, FireFringe, both those products. Anything else on the pipes in terms of like there's a pattern there, Earth observation? As I said, there's a whole industry. We got satellites with wood going up there. Things are launching, you know, dove-sized constellation.
There actually is a company that's trying to launch a wood satellite.
Yep, absolutely crazy. Yeah,
it's pretty darn cool. I mean, it'll burn out nicely when it re-enters the atmosphere. So I don't know whether safety is a factor in that decision. Well, I mean, where we're headed, I mentioned we've got a Canada-wide inventory, and this is something we're wondering about is you know, do we just make that available? People, you know, you just go in, you put in a shape file, or you draw your polygon and download the inventory for that area. I mean, that's something that we're contemplating doing, and it's you know, it may not be the proven reserve, sort of use my mining analogy, but it would certainly be probably at least a measured resource, you know. So that I think that would have a tremendous number of applications. So we're looking at that, and we're looking at some inventory areas where it's very high refresh rates. I mean, weekly kind of information. So that's something that we're looking at. Our species product is now it's in production, and it's in, you know, we're doing our, I guess you might call it, you know, we have commercial contracts to do that in Western Canada. So we're now mapping the major boreal species and a few others, and so that's something that we hope to be expanding. And that's a great example. You know, if you've got good LiDAR data, you know, why not add on the species composition of that with satellite data, right, with SkyForce? So that's where the two can work nicely in common, or you can do the whole thing with the SkyForce.
So your SkyForce, you're driving beyond the broad species grouping of hardwood software. You're going down one level, family level, or even
yeah. So it's pretty good at sort of, you look at, you know, spruce, pine, fir, and then balsam, poplar, and you know, and birch. Like it does that very well. Some of the other species, you know, larch and so on, it's pretty good. But you know, when you get into you know, sort of some more southern regions, you know, where you've got 15 species, well, then that starts to get pretty difficult. So we tend to just say other hardwood and other conifer, right?
Right.
You know, you've got only so many bands in the satellite, so you can only extract so much information. But you know, so if you get 75-78% accuracy, that's pretty good on a pixel by pixel basis, which is sort of what we're seeing. And so that's something we've been working on that for a couple of years now, and we're just rolling it out to our first clients, who know they're our first clients, right?
Yeah. Yep,
and they're
yep.
willing.
They're the whether they're sometimes early adopters are awesome, right? They recognize
Yeah.
their
Oh
role
yeah.
and they
You
get.
need it's great when in this business when you've got some clients who are early adopters.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Give and take there, right? They're going to hound you with asks and often in the free category, but what better way to validate product market fit
Oh,
there?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I was curious, thinking you made a comment earlier in the podcast, and I wanted to explore that. I guess as we look at the third part of our discussion, as we look to winding down, you made the mention about carbon, and so I'm curious because definitely at the broad scale, as we talk about commercial forestry, integrated forest companies, carbon's obviously at play there. Whether you just do 50% of above ground biomass to get to a carbon value there, but there's a lot happening out there in terms of building carbon trading exchanges driven by remote sensing, artificial intelligence, whether machine learning or deep learning and whatnot. What are you seeing on the Canadian landscape, and how? Because you mentioned you're kind of playing in that space and doing some of those estimates and that trade. What are your views on that? Like, where are we? I guess I'm curious to say, where are we in today's stage?
Well, that's an interesting question, Kevin, and I think the dust is still settling a little bit on that, but we're seeing, um, since that paper came out in Science Magazine about 2 years ago, saying that if you planted I think it's 2 trillion trees was the amount of calculated. I actually had a great Zoom conversation with the scientist who was the lead author on that paper a few months ago. Very interesting man. That if you planted 2 trillion trees, you would be able to absorb something like 50%. That's not the exact number, but of the carbon CO2 that's ever been emitted through since industrialization. Of course, we're still pumping it out, so that's not a permanent solution, but it buys you some time. And then, of course, Davos had the 2 trillion tree. The Davos World Economic Forum meeting last year came up as a result of that with the 2 trillion tree commitment. And since then, there's been a lot happening. I mean, we're seeing more and more companies who've got environmental and social governance programs and are trying to get more tree planting going on to sequester carbon. So we're actively involved in developing some of those projects. And then there's the government. The Canadian government has announced a 2 billion tree program. They're a little slow, given the promise was made, I think, in 2018. Or was it 2019, the last election?
Well, I think they're a little slow on multiple fronts, but we won't go there.
Because to get the trees planted, you should have had the seedlings in the nurseries 3 months ago to get them planted in 2022. So that probably means that realistically there's not going to be many trees going into the ground until 2023, and it won't be a billion. But nevertheless, there's that going on. We're the largest private land planter for Forest Ontario. We're planting 500,000 trees for them this year.
Okay.
That's all with the notion of reforestation and carbon sequestration. So we work with those landowners. So we have a whole division that focuses just on that. And it's interesting that division of our company ties together our forest management and our SkyForest, because the SkyForest is really useful there in terms of identifying land that may be eligible for planting. You still got to go talk to the landowner, of course, but you can filter out a lot of land that you don't want to look at.
And that's a good point that you are a land manager and you are you're drinking your own Kool-Aid. You're using SkyForest, your own technology in your day-to-day.
Oh yeah, like our foresters use SkyForest to manage those 8 million hectares. I mean, right. That's what they do, and to me, that's the best incubator you can have.
Yeah.
Right. Our own people use it for our own work, and they come up with really cool ideas. And then we say to our clients, hey, what do you think of that idea? And often turns into a product, right? So, but it also means it's very creative innovation, but it helps us get to know our own cooking and
right.
And improve on it. So we're using that in the carbon space, where we've got some work to do there because it's evolving so quickly, that whole space. But that's a big push of our R&D program. We've got a very strong technical group of people with PhDs in remote sensing and other advanced degrees. And so they're always trying to pump out new products in our innovation pipeline.
Yeah.
And carbon is part of that focus now.
Yeah. Well, one of the thoughts I had, maybe on a future podcast, I might invite a couple other players, maybe from other spaces, still EO, but maybe coming from the VC world, and just kind of have a roundtable discussion, cross fertilize, and see what the state of the art is. I guess as we're looking to wind down, I'm curious, because obviously with SkyForce, SkyFringe, or FireFringe, there's a strong EO component, analytics, probably some cloud processing, maybe on-prem, but from a trends point of view, share with me, I guess, with your CEO hat on and our listeners, what trends are you seeing coming in the next year? I won't say 10 years because we've already said that's too far out, but 1 year, 3-year time frame. What do you see coming? What would you like to see coming?
So I think what's two big trends I see, Kevin, is the whole planet through Earth observation is being transformed into one giant geodatabase. There was a while in the early days of SkyForest, we could keep track of the satellites that were being launched. Mm-hmm. That's very hard to do. I don't remember, when I was younger, I'd look up at the night sky when I was up north, and once in a while you'd see a satellite and you think, wow, I was looking at something. Now you lie down on the dock at the cottage and you look up at the night sky, and you only gotta wait 5 minutes till you see a satellite fly overhead. Right?
Or you see a bunch of Starlinks line going by.
The astronomers are starting to complain about that. You guys
right.
are mucking up our view here. So I think that's a trend, and it's such a trend that you've got Bezos and and Elon Musk investing in rocket technology to get even more satellites into space. So I think you're going to see that. It's the second big data revolution. The first one was the internet. The second one's going to be the Earth observation, because as I say, you can pretty literally take a picture of everything on the planet every day, and it's geo information. So that's the first trend. And the second trend, I think, is related to broader mega trends related to climate change, people's concern for the environment, the transformation of the forest sector. I think it's a hugely bright future for the forest sector in the next decade at least. Certainly the next few. You look at the price of lumber; that's just one of the indicators. It's going to get huge attention. Everything from biomass, you mentioned biomass, to protection of species, to reforestation, climate change, to new products. They can make computer screens now out of chemicals extracted from timber, right?
Well, I saw they made glass, basically, you
can take wood. I learned something. You can take a piece of wood, and if you put the right stuff on it, you can make it transparent.
Yeah, it's totally cool.
It's really amazing. So those are the two big trends, and I think they're gonna fuse, Kevin. And I think innovation is going to be key to dealing with these trends and winning some of the competitive battles that are going to come out. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. So, as we wind down, I always like to ask some lighter mood questions. I won't poke at your Toronto Maple Leafs at all, since.
No, don't worry. I'm not a Toronto Maple Leafs fan.
Okay, well there you go.
I was cheering them, when they. I won't betray my age, but a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just like me and my Ottawa Senators. I keep cheering, and hopefully once I've gone completely gray-haired, I've got some good.
I'll give you a clue. My wife's from Montreal.
Ah, yes, got you. Go Habs. I know some of our other speakers are like, no, I just can't do it. So thinking of something I want to ask, because I know you've got multiple. Doing the forest management, you've got a technology company, you're a CEO, you're thinking about macro things and whatnot. One thing I'm curious, because we've talked about carbon, we talked about climate, and I think you might be a great guy to answer again with your CEO hat on, is crypto. Bitcoin is in the news right now, I guess really any crypto, and then the costs of mining those cryptocurrencies. And I remember I was up in northern Alberta, and there's a lot of surplus in energy, as things were going through their life cycle. There's things, they could burn for energy, cogen and whatnot. What are your thoughts on that? Have you heard anything as you're talking to people about renewables and energy on forestry and how it could potentially play in crypto? Because like El Salvador recently, it's a volcano that's going to power mining. I think they're the first ones to vote in legislation, Bitcoin as legal tender. And
All
again,
right.
not financial advice. I'm not saying this is the way the world's going. Who knows? But for
Yeah.
me, it's like, if we're talking about energy, like forestry and forest products and
Well,
forest
yeah, I mean,
residuals.
it's going to be huge. I think, the use of the biomass for heating purposes. I mean, but you raise an interesting point about cryptocurrency. The energy consumption needs are massive, and I think people are starting already to worry about that. How much money it costs to mine, how much energy it takes to mine the cryptocurrencies. But there is one interesting connection: is these non-fungible tokens that they've
Yep.
been
The
selling works of
NFTs.
art.
Yeah.
And that's based on blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. And I'm starting to wonder whether you're going to start to see a fusion between that and Earth observation data, because what it could mean is you could get an image of some kind or some geospatial product and turn it into a non-fungible. I can't say the word.
An NFT.
And turn it into an NFT, and then that is now yours, like it's not anybody else's. So I'm starting to wonder whether you're going to see a fusion of blockchain technology and Earth observation or other remote sensing type of products. That's something I've been pondering.
Yeah, well, you definitely know me long enough. Back in the day, no one really, I might dare say some folks laughed me off the stage at times, and truthfully, now I'm looking out 10 years, and I think you're bang on. There's going to be a lot of change coming. As the workforce ages, younger people coming in, they're just by default receptive to new technologies. But this whole Web 3.0 thing is going to be really interesting to play. So and we'll see where it goes. But I think if anything, the pattern I'm seeing is that forestry is becoming more and more important on multiple domains, aspects, and it's a renewable, so it makes sense to me. So Phil, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they reach you? LinkedIn, website, Twitter?
So I'm just going to post here. I don't know if you can see that. I changed that.
Yep.
Kevin, I'll just try to get out of the way, but there's you can get us FRMG.ca or SkyForest.ca. Those are the easiest ways to reach us. And there's connect buttons there, or phil.green@frmg.ca would be the two ways. I appreciate the opportunity to tell your listeners how to reach me, Kevin.
Yeah, no worries. Absolutely. I think, there's some really cool stuff here. So definitely the Digital Forester podcast, people reach out to Phil. If you have any questions, follow up. When I think about fire, I can think of multiple parts around the globe where they're doing different techniques and technologies, methods that, hey, having an EO solution might help. And again, I think the messaging is clear that, collect the data, drive decisions with data. And, let's not forget there's a human component here, that humans can interpret the data and make decisions on what to do about it. Objective, repeatable analytics are good, but there is that human factor per se, and hence why we're not at that point of singularity either. But I won't go down that path of AI. Phil, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate you carving out some time to talk to me. As I said, when we synced up, it was kind of that joke of like, man, I think, it might have been Finland the last time,
Well, I think we should get together now that we're opening up a little bit, somewhere in between Ottawa and Toronto.
Absolutely. No, I look forward to that opportunity. So thanks again for sharing your time and sharing your thoughts and ideas and wisdom with the community. And, hopefully we'll be able to do this again in the future.
I really enjoyed it, Kevin, and I want to thank you for your generosity.
Awesome. Good stuff. Thanks, Phil. Talk soon.
Bye.